I hate to admit to that skydiving record because it undermines the credibility of everything I have to say because it's called a record for stupidity. But it's true. I am so honored to have an opportunity to talk to all of you this morning. I'm going to kind of give two talks. One will take about 2 minutes and the other about 20 minutes. But I'm going to quote two very famous people to kind of set the table for what I'm about to do. And by no means am I comparing myself to either of these people. But Martin Luther King gave the famous I Have a Dream speech. My speech is called I Have a Plan speech. Abraham Lincoln opened the Gettysburg Address by saying, "The world will little note nor long remember what we say here." Well, I am hoping that the world will take great note and long remember what I say here, and that is going to depend on you carrying my message forward. But before I get into that, let me explain why you all find next to your plate on the table my professional Heartland card, which I've been using for much of the past 20 years, speaking on behalf of Heartland around the country. The card has on the back, by now you've all seen it, my 10 favorite reasons why man is not warming the globe. And I really recommend that all of you who use a professional card, and if you don't, you should, put your favorite reasons why you don't think man is responsible for the climate of the planet. Day before yesterday, Wayne Dunshee, who's here in the audience, rushed up excitedly to show me his card because he'd heard me speak before and talk about it. And he had put his favorite 7 reasons on the back of the card. He thought 7 is better than 10 because that's why your telephone number is 7 digits. That's all you can remember. Psychologists know that. But that's up to you. Choose your reasons. Put it on the back of your card. I have distributed in recent years 30,000 of those cards. I give about 40 talks on behalf of Heartland a year. My average audience is 300. Everybody who comes into a room to hear me talk has that card either on their seat or on their table or on their plate. And when the meeting is over, it's rare to see a card left behind. It's just so easy to stick it in your pocket and purse, so I really highly recommend that you do that. I use them another way, too. I have a rule that when I'm on the road, I want to talk to 3 people up close and personal about global warming. And while I speak on a broad range of topics, from engineering to biotechnology, water resources, economics, even nuclear physics, there is no talk that doesn't have a few minutes about global warming and the fact that man is not responsible. And I'm telling you, I guess I talk in Main Street America, and I find few people ever disagree with me. I mean, I actually challenge people when I'm finished, or during the question period to challenge me, or after I'm finished to attack me. And I'm finding that my audiences are clearly 98% have the common sense to understand that man is not responsible for the temperature of the planet, which you've been hearing over and over again for the last 3 days. But I try to approach 3 people on the road every single day. It could be a maid coming in to clean my room. It could be somebody that makes a comment in an elevator about a tie I might be wearing. Somehow I'll have 3 up close and personal meetings with people, and I talk a few minutes and I give them my card. But I also do something else, and Keely's going to put a slide. I don't do PowerPoints, but I'm going to show you a slide right now of a diagram that I tend to draw on cocktail napkins, any piece of paper I can find, at times on the palm of my hand. And it's I think you're going to remember this, it's a chart that just plots A versus B, and it has a lot of data points on it. And then I ask people, you know, what's the general trend of that data, and they see that that's quite obviously the general trend. And then I explained that junk science is all about choosing your data to fit what you want. So in the next slide, you can see a very different trend using just the points you choose. And in the next slide, another trend. Junk science is just all about cherry picking your data. I strongly recommend when you get into a discussion with people, just grab a piece of paper and draw that chart. It takes about 20 seconds at most, and it just resonates with people. I'd also recommend something that was in Art Robinson's April Access to Energy newsletter. If you don't get it, you should. It's just amazing. But as you know, he's running for Congress for the 3rd time, and I'm going to tell you the 3rd time will be a charm. Yeah. But in the April issue, he talked about how he approaches people, and he finds common ground, he finds their concerns, he makes sure they know that he cares, and he talks in their language. And that's something that all of you eggheady scientists have to learn to do in talking to people, and it's something that I try to do as I travel the country. Okay, now to the main part. My plan. Also, I will point out, you all have on your sheets today, you know, how to talk about global warming, and it's excellent. Make sure all of you fold it up and keep it. But yesterday, yet another white piece of paper, which was like a petition to reduce the power of EPA. I think everybody will agree that the primary force that we battle in trying to show that anthropomorphic global warming does not really exist is the Environmental Protection Agency, which the president is using to bludgeon us. I don't think we can reduce the power of the Environmental Protection Agency. We have to eliminate, we have to replace US EPA. I am about to tell you with great detail, all of which will be published on Monday morning on the front page of the heartland.org website, which I hope after you hear me, you'll want to go to that website, download 4 pieces of paper, and send them to your congressman and your senator, because I think there is a chance of this plan taking fire. Now, I don't think there's anyone working in America today that has a greater right to develop a plan to replace US EPA in Washington than I, because I sadly must admit that I may have played the greatest role in America in establishing US EPA. I apologize, but there was a need. In 1968, I was asked by the Bureau of Water Hygiene to join a very select blue ribbon panel of people to help the Bureau of Water Hygiene change into a bigger, more powerful organization to be called the Environmental Protection Agency, and to develop a safety net of laws to protect our environment, which did not occur, which had not occurred. We succeeded in giving dozens of testimony before the Congress and the Senate, and in 1971, President Nixon established the Environmental Protection Agency. I have been doing penance for this now for the last 40 years, but I still don't regret what I started. The first step of EPA, when William Ruckelshaus, a man I knew well because he had gone to Princeton, the first thing he did was the worst thing he ever did, and that was to show that EPA was going to have teeth, and he outlawed DDT, even though all the research and all the committees had shown that DDT had no negative impacts. I confronted him at a reunion in Princeton one day, and I said, Bill, are you aware of the tens of millions of people who have died as a result of your ruling? And he just ignored me and walked away. It was kind of a devilish thing to do, but you know, he is responsible certainly now for the deaths of over 100 million people. But after that, I worked with EPA in the next 10 years, and we did establish a safety net of regulations. a Water Pollution Control Act that is now called the Clean Water Act, a Clean Air Act, a Solid Waste Control Act, a Surface Mining and Deep Mining Control Act, a Federal Insecticide Rodenticide Act that controls agricultural chemicals. We passed 7 laws that I was a part of that I remain proud of to this day. We did nothing in the 70s that was not effective. I would argue that since 1980, there has not been a single law, regulation passed by EPA through the Congress or produced by EPA by edict without congressional support that has been of any value to our nation at all, either to public health or to the environment. And it all began with what was the worst law developed by EPA that I happily didn't have a role in, and that was Superfund. And it was a disaster. It has only been exceeded by a congressional law that's even worse, and that's the Endangered Species Act that has impeded progress in every way throughout this nation without really saving a single endangered species. Well, my plan is to replace the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington with a committee of the whole of the 50 state EPAs. Now, the US EPA had to oversee all the regulations in every state initially because they were not geared up to do it themselves. But over the years, all 50 states took on what we call primacy, the responsibility to carry out all the environmental laws that was passed by the Congress. We now have 50 state agencies, every one of which does what most environmentalists would consider a very good job, and that can be proved by the fact that there's no single state in which industry and agriculture likes their Environmental Protection Agency. They're all overbearing, but they basically do a good job, far better than the federal government can do, because government is best when it is local. And we no longer need anyone in Washington. So my plan is as follows. And hopefully you're all going to download it and read it. We will phase out US EPA over a 5-year period and replace it and establish immediately in the first year this committee of the whole of the 50 state agencies, and the offices will be where actually all government offices should be, and that is in Topeka, Kansas. That is the center of the United States. So we will create offices. Each state will send 3 delegates to that office, a staff of 150. They will be delegates from the states, but they will be employees of the new Committee of the Whole of the 50 state environmental protection agencies. They will themselves elect a chairman for a 3-year term, and you can only serve 3 years, and so the chairmanship will rotate among states over the years. In Washington, we will phase out US EPA on a 5-year program. No one in this room could name me the 14 offices within US EPA that have their own budgets and their own manpower and their own axes to grind. But we will phase them out over 5 years as follows. Primarily, in the first year, we'll just explain to the federal US EPA and their 10 regional branches that over the next 5 years, all of you will lose your jobs. You're going to have plenty of time to relocate, and many of you will relocate to the state agencies, many from which you came, all of which will receive a $20 million annual allotment from the federal government to beef up their programs. Excuse me. The budget of US EPA is $8.2 billion. My plan will reduce that $8.2 billion down to $2 billion, $1 billion of which will be divided up, $20 million each, to the 50 states. The other billion will be to run the Topeka headquarters as well as the research and development laboratories that will stay in place but will operate under the Topeka office. In the first year, after explaining the program to all 14 offices and the 10 regional offices, the only thing that will leave EPA, and this is going to shock you, that there are 2 offices within EPA we're going to get rid of immediately, not eliminate, but move them. Would you believe that within EPA there is an Office of Indian Affairs? There's an Office of Indian Environment? Why is that not in the Bureau of Indian Affairs? Well, in the first year, we will move those 2 offices into the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who will be delighted to have them, especially when we'll give them half of the budget that these 2 offices have within US EPA. In the next 4 years, year 2, we'll get rid of policy, administration, and enforcement, 3 offices that can move or be eliminated into Topeka, where it will be overseen by the Committee of the Whole. In the 3rd year, we'll move air and radiation and solid waste. In the 4th year, we'll move the Office of Water and Chemical Contaminant Prevention. And in the 5th year, we'll move the Chief Counsel, Chief Financial Officer, the Environmental Information Office, and the Office of the Administrator. So if you're not keeping track, I just named all 14 offices within US EPA. Very smooth transition, and close down everything in Washington and close down everything in the regional offices. The elimination of the offices in each region, which essentially simulate the 14 offices in Washington, will move identical in lockstep with the 14 offices that I've just named over a 5-year period. Could not be more orderly. Will the 50 state agencies be delighted? I think most of them will be thrilled. Their states will get a $20 million annual input of finances to do a little bit better job. They will have a say in everything. Now, over this 5-year period, the Committee of the Whole of the 50 state EPAs will analyze every single regulation under which the states are forced to operate by US EPA. If those regulations are fiats from EPA and not written into a piece of legislation, they will have the right to revise them or eliminate them. They will have the right to put them in the purview of the states to deal with separately as they wish, or they will look at it and say, well, this really was written in the legislation, so we've got to leave it alone, and maybe we want to send a memo to Congress that they might want to consider a change. A 5-year period to analyze all of this. And obviously, global warming is about to become one of the biggest things US EPA does. You've all seen the president's edict a few weeks ago of what EPA is going to do with regard to eliminating carbon dioxide in the coal industry and coal-fired power plants and so on. They will be dealing with all of that. Again, over 5 years. It's so orderly. The economics is relatively easy. The states, with rare exception, will embrace it. I think the Congress will embrace it. Now, your job, and I spent 17 years in the Navy, and I retired as a lieutenant commander, and I had the neatest job. Because I had a PhD, I didn't have to go to weekly reserve meetings. I was allowed to go and give recruiting lectures in high school. So I am an experienced recruiter, and that really is my primary role today. I want to recruit everyone in this room to take my plan seriously. Go to the Heartland website Monday morning. It'll be on the front page. Download what will only be about a 4-page piece of paper. I'm almost finished with the details. And this isn't something I hatched overnight. I've been talking about this for 2 years. I actually tried to get it to Mr. Romney without any success. I have been beta testing it among people everywhere I go, and I generally get tremendous excitement. Of course, there are always the wet blankets that say, oh, you can't do that, it'll never happen. Well, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And I want everyone in this room to take that first step. And that... So I'm asking you all to go to our website Monday morning, download 4 pieces of paper, and send it to your congressman. Send it to your senator. Distribute it if you have an email list. Send it around. I really think nobody in this world except the radical leftist environmentalist likes EPA. Nobody. They think we need it. Well, we're not eliminating Environmental Protection Agency. I would argue we're going to improve environmental protection because it's going to be managed by the 50 states. Our neighbors, they'll do a better job. We will lose nothing other than many of the 15,000 employees and at least $6 billion of the budget. It's a plan. It can work. I'm counting on you to make it work. Thank you very much.